Hey everybody, Dave Buzanko here from Heartfit365, and today we're going to be doing a book review of some of the best ideas worth sharing from The Ripple Effect. Now, The Ripple Effect was written by Dr. Greg Wells, who I met a couple of years ago just before he released this book. And Greg is actually an author, a best-selling author of the book Super Bodies. Greg was also a featured commentator on the Vancouver Olympics, working with CTV, and he works with athletes on sort of one end of the extreme, and as a research scientist at Sick Kids Hospital, he works at the other end of the extreme with perhaps some of the sickest people on the planet. So what Greg has tried to do is try to look at human potential from both perspectives and looked at how we can potentially create solutions in our lives based on how people live their lives at the outermost extremes. So what we're going to do today is we're going to share an overview, a summary of the book. Personally, I think this is a fantastic book, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. But I think the concept here is Greg wants us to sleep better, move better, eat better, and if we do those three things, we'll think better as well. Now, there's a through line in this book, and the through line is, as Greg notes here, he talks about making 1% differences in our lives that will actually lead to substantial change or substantial benefits over many, many years. And the note that he mentions here is a 1% change may not seem like much, but each takes you step by step farther along the path to optimal health and reaching your full potential. So I love that, because basically what Greg is trying to say is you don't have to make major changes in your life. You just have to make small little improvements every day and make today better than yesterday. And if you consistently do that, over time, you're going to end up having a pretty awesome life. Now, I related to Greg because Greg became an Ironman triathlete a few years ago. He actually had a health crisis. He picked up a bug, a virus from his kids from daycare. And unfortunately, while his kids were immune to the bug or the virus, Greg was not. And it affected his heart, and he found himself at Sick Kids Hospital as a patient. And while he was there, he actually did what most normal patients do while they're having a heart problem, is they sign up for an Ironman. I can relate to that. Any of you who know my story know that I kind of went through a similar journey of having a heart scare and signing up for an Ironman just to prove to myself that anything is possible. But in that journey, Greg basically was able to explore his fullest potential, and in doing so was able to kind of sit back and think, hey, what are the things that I've learned along my journey, and how can I share that in an informative book that's going to help other people? So hence we have The Ripple Effect. Now, some of the key things that I want to talk about in this book. First of all, when it talks about sleep, I think we all understand now that sleep is a major issue worldwide. It's an epidemic, lack of sleep. And things like our smart watches actually sometimes do us a disservice if we don't know how to read the information properly or interpret the data. And we tend to think that we're not getting a lot of sleep at all, when really it's just the algorithm in the watch saying, yeah, you had 2 periods of sleep last night, and we don't combine those. We're just going to tell you had this one piece of sleep, and it may only be for half the amount of time you thought you were sleeping. So what was interesting in the book was Greg enlightened me to the fact that we sleep in 90-minute sleep cycles, which means that if you wake up in the middle of a sleep cycle, you're likely going to be groggy and not have as much energy. And it kind of makes sense if you think about the days that you wake up to your alarm and you just don't feel like getting out of bed, and there are other days when you just jump out of bed like no problem. The reason normally is because of these sleep cycles. So if you say to yourself, I need to get up at 7 a.m., then you need to say, if I want 7 hours of sleep, I'm going to wake up in the middle of a sleep cycle. But if I say, nope, I want to get either 7.5 or 6 hours sleep, then what you do is you just time yourself accordingly. So if I wanted to get up at 7 a.m. and get a proper sleep cycle in, then I'd have to go to bed at 11:30, so I get 7.5 hours of sleep. If I was going to get up at 6 a.m. maybe to do a workout, then I know that I've got to go to bed at midnight, or I've got to go to bed at 10:30 in order to wake up at the end of a sleep cycle. So I didn't know that these sleep cycles existed, and as I was reading the book, I started to realize and started paying attention to my sleep more, and I started to realize that they actually do exist and they do work. So Greg goes on to give 7 hacks for creating better sleep environments in your home. One of them is obviously avoid caffeine before you go to bed. Save your caffeine for the morning. Defend the last hour of your sleep. I mean, think about it. We've got TVs, phones, iPads, laptops, all kinds of things in our bedrooms. And what that does, that screen time actually affects your brain and your eyes. And for some people, a lot of people, it causes sleep disruptions. So what you want to be doing is you want to make sure you defend that last hour of your sleep and try to do something that doesn't involve a screen so that you've calmed your brain down so that you can actually get a good night's sleep. Keep your room dark. I mean, that's pretty simple, but a lot of us, I used to work shift work. A lot of people still do work shift work. I know there's times when I'm trying to go to sleep, my wife is beside me scrolling through her phone on Facebook or something, and she's reading. And it's that little bit of ambient light that's in the background. Even though my eyes are closed, I can detect it, I can see it. It drives me nuts. So the last time I was on a plane, I picked up the sleep kit on the plane, and now I've got a sleep mask. So I know it looks goofy, but there's times when I put it on because I need to get some sleep, and I know my wife's going to be reading for the next half hour, and it's going to just annoy me with that light on. So having a sleep mask is a great tool. Keeping your room cool. Going to bed cool and having sheets to put on top of you is much more conducive to a good night's sleep than being in a warm room. Again, try to aim for 7 to 8 hours of sleep, ideally 7.5. And if you are getting 6 hours of sleep only, then what you need to do is if you start to feel yourself midway through the day being lethargic, you can't focus, grab a short nap. That's okay. Hopefully you work in an environment where that would be acceptable. But even on your lunch, if you had to, just grab a 15-minute cat nap, recharge the batteries, take the edge off, and you'll feel much better for it throughout the rest of the day. One thing I learned as a triathlete is that you need to recover properly, and that includes proper rest. So if you need to get an extra half-hour nap in, go for it. Wake up naturally. This is something that I started doing more after I read the book just to see if I actually do sleep in 90-minute cycles. So on the weekend, I would actually allow myself to sleep in if I wasn't doing a long workout that day. And I just calculated back from the time I went to bed to the time I got up. And sure enough, it revolves within 5 minutes of those 90-minute sleep cycles. And then just, talking about jet lag, if you're doing any sort of international travel, you've got to have a strategy for jet lag. Greg puts a pretty good strategy together as to how to effectively manage your body and your time so that you can adjust yourself into various time zones. So I thought that was a really good lesson that I learned from the book with regards to sleep that I didn't know before. Moving more, I think that's a topic that we can all agree upon. We do a lot more sitting these days, and sitting actually does a lot of harm to our bodies. When we get up and move every hour, a lot of good stuff happens. Predominantly, we do get a hit of dopamine every time we get up and move around in a positive way, and that helps us moving forward throughout the rest of the day, keeping our energy levels high. So, one of the things that the book talks about is it talks about how lack of exercise actually leads to chronic diseases such as cancer. There's a connection between lack of movement and cancer. So, I know cancer is a very topical conversation for a lot of people, but things like heart disease, which is the #1 killer of men and women in North America, cancer #2, other chronic diseases coming in nice and close in behind, those things can all be affected dramatically by simply getting up and moving more. So if you're in a situation where you've got a meeting, the meeting's going to be 2 hours long, schedule a break, get up and move. Everybody in the meeting will appreciate that we've gotten up and moved, cleared the head, got the dopamine flowing again. These are good tips. Now, something that also Greg mentioned with regards to exercise was the brain-derived neurotrophic factors. So I'm going to go into the 7 keys that Greg gives here for moving more, and I'm going to explain how BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factors, work. So the first thing Greg talks about is building your fitness base, your aerobic base. And that's important because as you go through life, especially as you approach your retirement years and you want to start being more active in your older age and enjoy your retirement, you've got to be active. You've got to have that aerobic base built up. And the more you build it up over time, the stronger and fitter you become as you get older. It doesn't actually work in reverse. You can be strong and fit as you get older, as hopefully I will be evidence to show you folks. But when you work out aerobically, that's between 60 and 80% of your maximum heart rate. When you do that for extended periods of time longer than 30 minutes, you get these things called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factors. What that does, it stimulates new brain cells in your hippocampus. So I saw a great TED Talk the other day of another neuroscientist who was doing research, and she was basically just saying, you know what, it only stands the reason that even if you are predisposed to have some chronic illness in your life like Alzheimer's and dementia, which we do know there's genetics at play, if you have more brain cells for it to go through, it will take longer for that disease to take hold. One of the really interesting things that I found out, because my grandmother died of Alzheimer's and dementia or complications from that disease, my father died from Alzheimer's and dementia and complications from that disease, guess who's next? And I don't want that to be my future state. So, you know, one of the things that really stood out for me in this book was just reconfirming what my father's neurologist told him, which was that crosswords are for fun and entertainment, exercise is brain food. And that really stuck with me. Because I know now that when I work out and I'm working out aerobically, I'm getting those BDNFs. I'm making my brain healthier and stronger, which is something that my father and my grandmother did not do. They did, well, my father played anaerobic sports. He played basketball. So to be really clear, an aerobic sport is when your heart rate is between 60 and 80%. Anaerobic means you're going over that 80%. Think about skating or playing hockey or playing basketball. When you're sprinting back and forth, you're shooting your heart rate up and bringing it back down. You're not getting the BDNFs when you do that. That was my dad's sport, so he was never getting the BDNFs. So when you think about anaerobic exercise, I don't want you to discount that either. Too many fitness people really kind of say you've got to do this or you've got to do that. You've got to have a balance of both. That's why I love triathlon, 3 different sports, but I also, on top of the triathlon, I row, and I also do compound movements, kind of like HIIT workouts for 15 minutes, but it's all just with my own body weight. I think Greg's he's reinforcing in the book that that's a great mix. You've got to have that, blend of exercise in your life really to reap the rewards and benefits from all of the different types of exercise. You know, you build up testosterone when you lift weights and build body strength. You make your heart and mind stronger when you do aerobic workouts. So something that Greg touches on in the book is a couple of books actually that I'm going to be doing a review on in the next couple of weeks. One, he talks about the diet fix, which is written by Dr. Yanni Friedhoff, which also talks about why exercise is the world's best medicine, but it's a horrible weight management tool. That is simply because you cannot burn off enough calories in an hour of exercise. Even the most fit athlete cannot burn off the right amount of calories in an hour to offset a bad diet. And so we're going to talk about that book in the future. The other book that Greg relates to in this book, The Ripple Effect, is Spark, which is written by Dr. John Radke. And Dr. Radke basically talks about, he did some studies in the inner city in Chicago, and he talks about how exercise before doing really difficult classes or really difficult thinking actually helps the brain to solve problems better. So that's one of the really great benefits of exercising in the morning, is that if you exercise in the morning, you'll be a better problem solver and you'll be able to handle stress better when you get to the office. So I love the fact that Greg is citing those 2 books, and I'll be reviewing those books in the coming weeks. Now, something else that Greg talks about is just building your speed. So here's an idea that I want you to consider. As we get older, you know, we often hear of seniors tripping and falling. If you had quick twitch reflex muscles, which you develop by developing speed in your workouts, you actually give your body the ability to move quicker, respond, be more agile and less likely to fall and more likely to recover if you do get into a tripping situation. So, I mean, I like to bring these things back to a practical purpose, and that's why I love doing sprints when I'm running. I'll do what they're called fartleks. And runners will know what that is. It's you're running along just at a nice easy pace, you hit a telephone pole and you sprint to the next telephone pole. That's building your quick twitch reflex muscles, and that's good as you grow older. It's a good, and you feel great when you do it too. Building your mobility is all about stretching. I'm very guilty of not stretching. I do a lot of working out, but I do, relatively speaking, very little stretching, and I'm paying the price for that right now. I've got a plantar fasciitis injury to my left foot because I wasn't stretching over the last 12 years, and well, now I'm paying the price for that. The other thing that Greg talks about is getting outside in nature more. Think about it. If you can get outside and get out and swim, bike, run, go for a walk, get fresh air, it just lifts your mood up considerably. Doesn't matter what time of year it is. I love running in the rain. I hate running in the sleet, though, to be honest with you. I live in Canada, so sometimes the weather can get a bit ugly, but I love running in the wintertime when it's just snowing out. It's awesome. Greg also talks about being a 24-hour athlete, and that just simply means, looking at life the way an athlete would. Thinking about how you eat and fueling your body for the next 24 hours versus just fueling your body for entertainment or because you sort of, it's a habit. You're sitting down in front of the TV and you crave a bag of chips. That's a habit. You need to start thinking about how would an athlete fuel his body for the next 4 to 12 hours. And when you start thinking in that perspective, you start making better food choices. And the last thing that Greg talks about is use it or lose it. Totally agree with that. If you stop either lifting weights or if you stop working out or if you never have worked out, you're going to find that your range of mobility and agility and your ability just to enjoy life in general is going to decrease dramatically as you grow older. These are the people who end up sick and unhealthy as they grow older. For those of us who actually invest that 1% every day, and we're not talking about making major changes. Remember, Greg's talking about making a 1% change to your lifestyle on a daily basis so that today is just 1% better than yesterday. And if you continually follow that pattern, eventually you'll get to the place where you're feeling amazing. I didn't get to 3 Ironman finish lines overnight. It's been taking me 12 years to get here. And every day is better than yesterday. Even though I'm injured, I'm still cycling and swimming. Not running very much, but I'm cycling and swimming until that injury heals. Today is always better than yesterday. And I feel better than I did when I was 25 years old. So I'm sharing that because Greg's premise of being 1% better in this book, it really does resonate well with me because I've seen the fruits of that in my own behavior. So Greg goes on to eating smarter, talking about the global epidemic of obesity. And you have to look back, like Greg paints the picture. Our food system has changed in the last 40, 50 years to the point where we can't even recognize what we're eating as food half the time these days. So what Greg wants us to start thinking about in the book is recognizing the difference between nutritionally dense food and calories. So nutritionally dense food tends to have fewer calories, but higher nutrients, higher dietary fiber. It responds differently in our body. So there's good carbs and there's bad carbs. The good carbs would be broccoli and vegetables. The bad carbs would be white, highly processed bread. Whole grains are good carbs in moderation. Again, thinking like an athlete, fuel your body for the activities that you're doing. If you're not very active, you're not going to need a lot of carbs to give you the glycogen in your bloodstream to fuel that activity. But if you are being active, then you do need to have some carbs in your body from whole grain sources that are going to, again, bring up your glycogen levels in your bloodstream and allow you to do the activities that you're going to do. So again, these are all things covered in Greg's book, not my opinion. That's why I love the book though, because a lot of things that Greg talks about really resonate well with me. So talking about nutritionally dense foods versus energy dense foods, that's a big distinction. Greg encourages you to go and read your food labels of the food that you're buying. One of the things that Greg refers to in the book, which I refer to as well quite often, is the World Health Organization. They state that a safe amount to consume on a daily basis is 24 grams or 7 grams 24 grams or 7 teaspoons of sugar per day. If you are consuming that amount or less, you're really doing well. But there's a lot of hidden sugar in a lot of the processed foods that we eat, and most people simply do not have a clue how much sugar they're consuming on a daily basis. So when you sort of pull back the blinds and you get to see what that really looks like by reading a food label, you gain that new perspective that Greg shares with you. All of a sudden you start to go, hey, in order to make the best possible choices for my life, I need to make an informed choice. And I do that by taking this information Greg's sharing and applying that to the foods that I eat every day. So really enlightening stuff. The 7 keys to eating smarter that Greg has given us here are: first, stay hydrated throughout the day. Quite often we make bad food choices because we're dehydrated, so make sure that you're drinking water, that you're not drinking or tea or a little bit of coffee, but really try to stay away from the sugary drinks, juices for example, sodas, the beverages that you can buy from the coffee shops that are just loaded up with sugar. If you do yourself a favor and go next time you're at the coffee shop and pick up one of their portable drinks and just read the ingredient label and see how many grams of sugar. Most of them have about 48 grams of sugar per serving, which is just like almost double your daily allowance. And if that adds up on a day-to-day basis, you're going to be in trouble down the road. So Greg again is talking about how do you make the right decisions so that those right decisions compound in your favor. So eating mostly plants. I will tell you, I am not a vegetarian or a vegan, but I do eat probably an 80% plant-based diet now. And I do eat lean proteins. Greg does talk about the difference between sort of the proteins that we're buying at the grocery store, which are sort of grain-fed by mass production versus free range, which would be grass-fed lean meat. The reason being is that the grain-fed, what you're getting from mass production, what you're buying at the grocery stores, typically cause inflammation. That inflammation is caused by the food source that the animals eat and is passed along in the meat to us. So in order to eliminate inflammation in your body, it's okay to eat lean proteins, but you want to be getting those from animal sources that are grass-fed. Now I'm going to be honest, I've had a really tough time finding a supplier locally of grass-fed grain or grass-fed beef or chicken, although at Costco I can pick up grass-fed chicken eggs, which is a good start in the right direction. And the fact that I'm even thinking about it is something that Greg has brought to my attention. And the fact that I may not be doing it, but I'm thinking about it is what the intent of the book is. Think about how you can make these small changes. So I'm on the lookout. Haven't found the solution yet, but I'm on the lookout. Okay, so consume more nutrients and fewer calories. Again, that concept of eating nutritionally dense foods. Eating anti-inflammatory foods. So I just talked about the foods that we eat and what causes inflammation. Well, again, consider the food source. We live in this world where we're eating a lot of farm-raised fish, chicken, pork, and beef. And if we were getting those things in a natural environment where they were able to eat the grass around them, they would be a healthier piece of meat that we would be able to eat, and we would not have the same inflammation that we're getting from a mass-produced animal. So something to consider, especially when you're making your fish selections. If you're buying salmon, for example, make sure you're not getting farmed, that you're buying wild caught. And then eating healthy fats, things like olive oils and avocados. It's important to realize that fat is a more important part of your diet, but the right kinds of fat, right? So you want to pay attention to the right kinds of fat. Again, eating healthier carbs versus your white breads, for example. Eating more vegetables versus white bread or whole grain breads. And then the last one is eating more healthy proteins, which we've already touched on. So the last thing that Greg wants you to think about is the relationship between sleeping, eating, moving, and thinking. So there is a global mental health epidemic right now. And one of my visions in life is that I believe that in the not too distant future, if we share these kind of messages, that every parent will be able to sit at the kitchen table with their teenage and adult children and have informed and intelligent conversations about diet, exercise, and mental health. I think that's possible. But for people who want to see that become their reality, they have to do their homework. They have to pick up books like The Ripple Effect and start reading them, or hopefully at least be turned on to this book through a video like this. But it's this kind of perspective that we're trying to share with you, and these ideas worth sharing that are going to inspire you to pick up the book, inspire you to become somebody who actually follows through on the advice, the full advice that Greg gives. The other thing that Greg talks about when it comes to having better mental health, there's a list of 7 items here. So practicing daily gratitude. You know, if you're in a bad frame of mind all the time, stop and take a moment to deliberately think about something that you're grateful for, and then talk about it. Just, maybe send an email and say, hey, I'm grateful for the help that you gave me, or I really appreciate the time that you spent me. One little positive piece of gratitude actually evolves into and spirals off into so many more offshooting spin effects of positivity. Spend more time on relationships, spend less time online and more time actually connecting with human beings. When you get home from work, don't put yourself on the computer. Spend time with your family, spend time with your friends, go out and see people. That's how you start getting positive dopamine flowing in your body. That's how you start feeling good about yourself. buy experiences and not possessions. I like this one because I think growing up, I always wanted to have a cottage. I wanted to have a fancy car. And now as I'm older, I just want quality of life. I want to enjoy life. There's just so much to see around the globe. I want to see it all, and I want to do it in a healthy and meaningful way. Volunteer more. That's something you can give your money all you want, and people are going to say whoop-de-doo. But if you actually go out of your way to spend some time volunteering. I volunteered as a rowing coach for years in high school, and it was some of the most gratifying time. Even though I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning to be out on the water with the kids at 6 and getting back by 8:30 to be at work at 9 and doing that almost year round for about 6 years, it was some of the most gratifying experiences that I had. And it makes you feel so good that you're helping others. So volunteering more is really important. Engaging deeply with life. I do an Ironman, right? To me, that's engaging. But I'm also looking to engage with you through a channel like this, where I can hopefully scale my voice, scale Greg's books, and help the rest of the world who want to realize that vision of a healthy, happy future, who believe that's possible for themselves. By engaging deeply here, I can hopefully start a conversation that's going to go worldwide. Thinking clearly, like just getting up, moving around, shaking the cobwebs out. You've got to get up and move every hour, or else you're going to be really kind of stagnant in your thought waves. And then the last thing Greg talks about is understanding that your brain controls your immune system. Your immune system has a direct impact on chronic disease. So things like cancer, it can be fought off by your immune system, but you've got to have a healthy mind in order for your immune system to be responsive. So Greg touches on that as well. The last thing that Greg really tries to wrap the book up with is, he calls them 7 pathways for a world-class life. And he basically takes 7 types of people: a CEO, an athlete, a student, a parent, an arts performer, somebody who's trying to transform their life to get better and healthier, and somebody who's already a health advocate. He takes those 7 personality styles, those 7 human profiles, and he basically gives you what a day would look like in their lives, so that you can kind of slot yourself in where you think it works for you, and then try to adapt some of the principles that Greg is talking about so it makes sense for you. I think that's a really, really powerful part of the book, that Greg gives you these strategies to use. The other thing at the back of the book here, Greg cites, which most books do not. This whole back section of the book is all citing, you see that, it's all citing scientific research. It's important to remember that Greg is a research scientist. These are not his opinions, these are facts, and he's using stories and metaphors to make those facts more digestible by regular folks like us. So something I got from this book was a tip to go to use a product called Headspace. Now, I don't get paid by Headspace at all, but I'll put it in the link below. Headspace, I use the free app there's 10 different meditation sessions, and I find that when my mind is really, really going 100%, and I need to calm myself down before I go to sleep, I find that using Headspace really helps to calm me before I go to sleep. So that's one really good tip that Greg gave me. The other thing Greg did talk about, again, was the books The Diet Fix and Spark. I'm going to be reviewing those books as well in my upcoming book reviews. And all these books that are mentioned in today's show, you can find them on the link below. So go down there and have a look to see if there's anything on the show that was of interest for you. I recommend highly picking up this book. This is a staple. I've read this several times. Actually, this is from my last airline flight, my flight ticket, because I bring that book on planes, because that's a great time to spend 4 or 5 hours reading. So yeah, if you've got any comments, leave them below, and let's keep the conversation going. I think as a 52-year-old male, these are things that there are other men out there my age, or women out there my age, who are struggling with some of the challenges that we're struggling with. And I think this is a really healthy way to review the good advice that's out there and the not so good advice that's out there, and try to save you some time, save you some money through these book reviews, but give them, hopefully, give you a unique perspective on what you can hope to achieve by purchasing and reading these books. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next book review.